welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you have ever wanted to know how to put detail like this onto a piece of furniture, then this could be the video for you. This is a little tea trolley that I picked up from a car boot sale. It cost me £10 in the summer and I've been stashing it ever since for a little makeover. I was finally inspired by this paper napkin and I put it on the drawer front. It's a beginner friendly makeover and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. We're starting outside with this one. It was a nice day. It was cold, but it was a nice day. And when I bought this piece, the lady on the car boot sale came running after me. I picked it up for £10 and started to carry it away. And she came running after me and she said, "Oh, I've got the original casters for this." So I gladly took those and popped those in the drawer. Now, as you can see, there is some residue felt on the inside of the drawer as well. Luckily, that pulled off pretty easily and just left a little bit behind. And what I'm doing now is I am cleaning the whole piece. Now, we know old ladies like Pledge. They love polish, and this was very clean, but it did reek of polish. And any cleaning product that's left on the surface can cause issues with paint sticking to the surface, and obviously we don't want that. So the first thing I always do is give my piece a really good clean with Dixie Belle's White Lightning, and then I give it a rinse with clean warm water afterwards and let it dry. So step 1 of the prep was to clean. Step 2 is to give it a scuff sand. Now this is just going to help me get my paint to stick onto the surface. Some people don't scuff sand, some people do. I'm going to be using Silk All-in-One mineral paint, and it is advised if you are going to use that paint to give your piece of scuff sand to get the best out of the paint and make sure it adheres to the surface. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using my electric sander to get into all of the kind of flat areas of this, but it wouldn't take that long to do this by hand. You don't need an electric sander to scuff sand. You are literally just scuffing up the surface of the piece. You don't have to take this back to bare wood. And for all the kind of detail bits, I just used an old scrap piece of sandpaper, folded it in half, and then I just got in all of the little nooks and crannies of the piece just to make sure everything had an even scuff sand. So you remember me saying the drawer had some green felt in it, which did pull out the majority of it. When I just pulled it, it just came out. It just left a little bit of the residue in the bottom, and it also stained the base of the drawer as well. So I just sanded the residue away, and then I'm using this tool, which my camera will not focus on, which is a scraper. It's a really sharp scraper. I'm hardly pressing on at all, and that's just going to get in all the corners and the details where there's a little bit of glue and felt residue left over. All of the products that I'm using, including this tool, I will drop in the description below. I just get this one off Amazon, and it's really good because you can replace the blades, and like I say, it gets in all the nooks and crannies. It's a really, really good tool. Once you've scuff sanded, don't forget to remove any dust residue on the surface of the piece. I just use a microfiber cloth that's lightly dampened with water, but you can also use a tack cloth, and as you can see, I've got a paintbrush in the other hand, and that's just getting all the dust out of the little corners. It's just a dry paintbrush, and I'm just basically getting all of the dust out of the corners with the paintbrush and then wiping it up with my damp microfiber cloth. The first thing I did paint wise is just put a base coat of white on the drawer. You remember me saying at the start of this I was going to show you how to decoupage with a paper napkin. Well, I always undercoat where I'm going to decoupage in white. You can use any white, but I'm using Silk mineral paint in the colour Salt Water, and that's because it's got built-in stain blocking primer as well, so I don't need to prime this separately and then put my white paint on. It will literally just do it all in one. I did 2 coats of this. The grain was quite deep, and it just, for full coverage, I just did 2 coats, but you can see how well it's covering in one. I just popped that drawer to one side to thoroughly dry, and then I turned the entire table upside down. 9 times out of 10 I will do the underneath of a piece first, and that's so that you don't have to keep flipping it over when you've got wet paint, and it just reduces anything getting kind of disturbed in the process. So I normally do my pieces upside down, not always, but normally. And as you can see, I was stirring my paint prior to use. That's really important to do, not just with silk mineral paint, but with any paint or any product that you use, especially if it's been sat for a while on a shelf. Give it a good stir, because all the heavy ingredients will sink to the bottom and all of the lighter ingredients will rise to the top. And as you can see, I'm just applying this straight onto that scuff sanded wood. You don't need to prime with this because it has a built-in stain blocking primer. I'm just using an artist's brush to get in all the nooks and crannies, but you can also tape any areas off that you don't want to paint. I just find it easier doing it this way than getting in a sticky mess with masking tape. So your first coat you will allow to dry for 2 to 4 hours. Don't worry if it looks a little bit kind of scary at that stage. Most first coats of paint do look a little bit scary. Your second coat of paint is where you will start to see the coverage build up, and it will get you that true colour that you are achieving, which in my case is this jet black colour. And then I flipped it over once the underneath was dry, and then all I had to do was the parts that were facing upwards. And I just find it easier to work this way. Not everybody does, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but I just prefer to work with my pieces upside down first, get the boring part of the underneath done out of the way, and then I can concentrate on the bits that you're actually going to see. Back to the decoupage drawer. Most paper napkins will be either 2-ply or 3-ply, meaning they have several layers that makes up the napkin. You only need the top layer, which is very thin, and obviously, as you can see here, I'm struggling to separate the layers. This is quite a high quality paper napkin. Some of the not so expensive paper napkins are a little bit easier to get apart. You can discard the 2 kind of white layers. There is a faint pattern usually on one, which you can sometimes use, but I don't tend to use it. You can sometimes use it for other projects, and that will just leave you with your top layer of your paper napkin, which is incredibly thin and see-through, hence the white background. Now, you don't need any special adhesive for this. You can buy special adhesive, but you don't need it. I use clear coat in satin from Dixie Belle, which is actually a top coat and traditionally used to seal or finish your paint finish. I'm using it as an adhesive, and I'm also going to be using it as a sealer here for my decoupage as well. So I'm applying a really thin, even layer with a paintbrush over that drawer, and then before that clear coat has a chance to dry, I'm just going to place the napkin. I think there was a little bit of something trapped on the surface there. I'm just going to place the napkin as evenly and as flat as I can on the surface of the wet top coat. The reason I love using Dixie Belle's satin clear coat is because it has a gel-like consistency and it doesn't dry super quickly. It's also not overly sticky, which means you get a little bit of play in your decoupage. It gives you a little bit of time before that starts bonding to the surface. So for example, if you need to lift an area to remove a wrinkle, which happens, we're working with incredibly thin tissue or napkin or whatever it is, you do get wrinkles, you can get bubbles. This corner here had a little bit of a wrinkle, so as you can see, that satin clear coat hasn't dried, and it's like I say, gel consistency. So when I lift the corner of the tissue, it's not going, I say tissue, it's a napkin, it's not going to rip the napkin or cause any issues there. And as you can see, I'm just really gently tapping any kind of wrinkles or inconsistencies on the surface, and then just making sure that all of the edges are sealed down. I'm using my finger. Sometimes I will use cling film or saran wrap. It just depends on what I'm decoupaging with. I find my finger used best with napkins just because they are super thin and they do have a tendency to rip if you're not careful. So I find using my finger just helps because you can feel the tolerance of the paper better. I'm also just trimming the excess off just because it was just hanging there in the way. When that clear coat has dried, you're then going to want to seal your napkin, and that is going to stop it getting damaged or scratched, because at this point it is literally only a napkin stuck on the drawer front. There's nothing to protect the surface of it. So I'm using clear coat satin again just a really thin layer and a very light hand, and don't be tempted to do this when it's still wet because you will probably rip your paper napkin. I've done it before many times trying to rush the project and it never turns out well. So wait until it's completely dried. You can put it in front of a heater to speed it up a little bit if you are impatient like me, and then just put a really thin coat of clear coat on. Depends on the sheen that you want. I'm just going for satin here, but you can also do this with gloss and matte as well if you wanted to, and again leave that to completely dry. I did 2 coats of satin clear coat and let it really thoroughly dry before getting a sanding sponge, which is equivalent to a 220 grit. Anything more kind of harsh than that, you are going to risk scratching your paper. And then just really lightly moving away from the front of your drawer. Try not to do left to right motions. It's really hard to not do that, but try and work away from the drawer, and that's going to give you a nice crisp finish and stop the paper from ripping. And then finally a final coat, or however many you want. I just did an extra 1, and that's just going to help seal the very edges where you've just kind of tidied it up and made a nice neat edge. So this is a final coat of satin clear coat going on now. Also, don't worry if you think your top coat looks a bit hazy or milky. That's perfectly normal. As you can see here, it's going on a little bit hazy. Once that dries, it goes completely clear. So you remember me saying the felt had stained the interior of the drawer, so I'm going to give it a bit of a pop of colour on the interior. This is Fiery Sky, and this is again a silk mineral paint colour. I do use silk most times if I'm painting the interiors of drawers or cupboards because it is really durable, and again you don't have to top coat. I also really lightly distress this piece. This is completely optional obviously, but it's something that I like to do. It's something that I do quite a lot in my work, but it's not for everyone. If you are going to distress silk though, do it sooner rather than later because it dries extremely tough. Something else that I like to do, which again you don't have to do with silk mineral paint, I just like to do it because I like the finish it gives. I'm just adding a real light coat of How Do You Do hemp oil over the top. Now this stuff's like liquid gold because we can no longer get it in the UK due to shipping restrictions, which is a shame. I've got a little stash of it and I do tend to use it very sparingly, but I love it over dark colours, and you can use it over silk. Although silk has got a built-in top coat already, you can use it over the top of silk. It doesn't absorb into the paint like it would do a little bit more with chalk mineral paint, so it does behave slightly differently depending on the type of paint you put it on. But as you can see here, it just adds a luster to the paint. Now this dries completely matte, so it's not going to add a sheen or anything like that. It goes on and it does look like it's quite shiny, but believe me, it does dry completely matte. It's just something that I like to do on dark colours personally. And again, what it's going to do also, where I've distressed the edges, it's going to really bring out that kind of warm oak tone to the wood, which is going to help contrast against the black. Again, like I say, completely optional. It's just something that I like to do over dark colours and on certain pieces, but it's not for everybody. If you do use How Do You Do hemp oil, just make sure you remove the excess with a clean rag or lint-free cloth. This is just going to make sure that it's nice and even and there's no kind of patches where you haven't removed the excess and it's kind of just sitting on the surface. And then to the original casters. So these are the casters that the lady ran after me and said she had, and I'm quite grateful she did that because I really do like original pieces on things where possible. Original handles, original casters, original hinges. These are perfectly workable. There's nothing wrong with them at all. It's just that they were a little bit tarnished and a little bit dull. I initially did a coat of gold gilding wax on these. As you can see, this is just plain gold, and I felt like it wasn't quite fitting. They looked too new and it looked too gold. So I used a little bit of bronze to add a little bit of shading, and it's just going to darken the gold and make it look more like a brass or an antique-y gold kind of look. So I'm just using the two together to kind of create that darker tone. You can see the left is got the bronze on it as well as the gold, and the right is just gold on its own. and I just feel like it fits the piece better. The handle I'm just going to put back on. It was the original handle. I just gave it a little clean in normal tap water. There was actually nothing wrong with it at all. And then the last thing I did is use the rag that I had some hemp oil on and just went over the drawer that I'd sanded back, because there was some kind of imperfections on it as well. You can just see how it's kind of nourishing the wood and changing the tone of the oak to a much kind of deeper, richer tone. Like I say, I'm using this very, very sparingly because we can't get it anymore in the UK. But you can just see how much it's kind of conditioning the wood and just bringing that tone back, so that when obviously somebody opens the drawer, it's not going to be sort of like a dried out, tired looking wood. It's going to be nice and fresh. What you can also do with hemp oil is tidy up anywhere that you've gone over the lines with gilding wax, because it's an oil-based product, so it will remove gilding wax if you've gone over the edges, like I often do. As always, I've got a couple of close-up shots so you can see the finish of the piece. Here's the decoupage on the drawer front. I just love this paper. I think it's super pretty. There's that pop of the Fiery Sky red colour, which works really well with the paper napkin design. And then here's the final shot, staged with a little bit of Prosecco, which I didn't drink, by the way. I put it back in the fridge. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it as always, and I hope it was helpful. If you do have any questions on anything that I've done today in the video, make sure you drop them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. As always, if you want to press subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing, and I will catch you next time. Bye.